You're about to start the Properties of Air lab, and I wanted to make sure that you had some of the basic understanding of air pressure before you start so that you can be successful in understanding what you're seeing in the lab. I also wanted to be able to give you some tips and tricks to make sure that your lab goes well. So just to review, atmospheric pressure is a force or pressure exerted from the weight of particles on an object. Now when you're sitting right here in the room watching this video, there's actually a lot of air particles and molecules on top of your head. I kind of like to look at it like this image that you see on the screen, where the lower you are in the atmosphere, the more air there is on top of you pushing down. Now you can't feel that because it's just something that your body has adjusted to, and that's just normal. You do find though, however, that when you change elevation, like you go up a mountain, you would find that your ears pop, and that has a little bit to do with your body adjusting to a new and different pressure. The image you see on the screen has two people at different elevations, and as that image we locked in the pre-lab, there is a lot more particles packed close together at this lower elevation point versus this person at the top of the mountain, where there are less particles around them and pushing on them. One of the connections that I want you to make with pressure is it doesn't just have to do with elevation. It also has to do with temperature. And this revisits a lot of what we learned about earlier this year regarding the particulate model and states of matter and their behavior. You can see on the screen here where I have this image of cold air versus hot air. You could imagine, based on how packed the cold air particles are together, they're more dense, and therefore, since they're more tightly packed, they're going to have the ability to apply a greater pressure, whereas the hot air particles are more spaced out. You're going to need to make that connection between temperature and pressure quite a bit in this lab. On to tips and tricks. There are some pretty cool experiments, but it's really important that you understand how to do them and what's happening and how to make sure that it works for you. One of the labs, you are going to be starting a candle underneath a jar. And I want you to look at this formula here. So this first number, this represents the candle. This next one represents the fuel that the oxygen uses, or that the fire uses. We know that fire needs oxygen to burn. And I want you to make note that when the flame is lit under the jar, it is using oxygen up. Now that oxygen is not disappearing because it's not breaking the law of conservation of matter, but it is turning into something else. It's actually turning into, as we look at the products here on the right, it's turning into liquid water. And so what that means is the volume that oxygen took up has now decreased after the flame has gone out and used up the oxygen. You're going to need to make note of that when you do this lab. Another one of the labs, you're going to need to use a pop can. And as a tip for you, Mrs. Kobani and I are providing pop cans, but you are allowed to use only one. So if the first one doesn't work out so well, just know that you are not able to use more than one pop can. Another lab, and this is my favorite one, is the egg and the flask one. I wanted to give you some tips on this because you are using fire. Try to limit your use of matches. I would say no more than 2 matches. And when you place the burning paper into the flask, as you see in this picture here, make sure that the paper is upside down so that the flame catches and lights and fully catches fire so that it uses up the oxygen in the flask. Another note with this is we do have enough eggs, but only enough for 1 per group. In fact, it would be great if you paired up with another group to maybe up to 4 people on this one so that we can conserve the amount of eggs. And last, but very important, is there is fire in this lab, so please make sure to have your goggles on while you're in the lab the entire time. Also, as normal with the labs, the directions are very important. Please make sure to read them carefully so that your lab works. good luck, and we hope you have a lot of fun.